This is Al Jazeera.
Libya's parliament has approved a new interim unity government as part of a UN-backed deal. It will be responsible for holding elections later this year. Libya has been divided between two rival administrations supported by armed groups and foreign governments. There's been unrest since an uprising toppled Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. Let's speak to our correspondent in Libya, Malik Trainer, who's in Misrata. Libya finally has a unity government, Malik, but it took intense negotiations to get here.
Well, that's right. It's been a long and difficult process to come up with this agreement and this new unity government. Now, Libya has been engulfed, as you said, since an armed revolution toppled Muammar Gaddafi in 2011. After that, things went quite well for a couple of years. When this parliament was elected in 2014, they were supposed to be based in eastern Libya. But around the same time, Warlord Khalifa Haftar began a military operation there to cement his power base. So many MPs, especially from Western Libya, boycotted the parliament, citing security concerns. And really, that's when the divisions began. Two rival governments began, one in Eastern Libya, one in Western Libya. In 2015, the UN facilitated the Libyan political agreement that brought the rival sides together. They came up with the Government of National Accord, which is the internationally recognized government here in Tripoli. But that was Haftar refused to recognize that government, as well as Aguila Saleh, the Speaker of the Tobruk-based parliament. So they've been quite divided, and there's been a lot of division also among the international community, which sort of fanned the fire of divisions. But now we're seeing that the international community are more willing or want to see a unified Libya. And the MPs, after years of divisions, were actually finally able to meet, have a session, and give this new national unity government a vote of confidence. Just recently, we've seen that both rival governments have stated that they are willing to hand over power. So quite a historic day in terms of Libya, and perhaps the beginning of a serious reconciliation process.
Thank you for that, Malik Trainer, live for us there in Misrata. Let's discuss this further now with Anas Al-Gamati, who's the founder and director of the SADC Institute. He joins us from Istanbul. Good to have you with us, Anas Al-Gamati. So, as we've heard, there's some intense negotiating to keep all of Libya's varied factions on board. First of all, how hopeful are you that this vote today, this new unity government, will finally put Libya on the right path to end its conflict?
So it's a great question. I think it's a symbolic victory. It's huge. It's the first unified executive in almost 7 years, as your correspondent in Misrata has already mentioned. That in itself is a major, major victory. And it shows and demonstrates, at least a reflection on the part of the constituencies across the country that they want to turn over a new page and a new chapter and begin to unify the divided institutions that have essentially divided the country for the last 7 years. That aspect is something that is still a long, long way away. And I think that we have to be clear about and understand the greater context here. There is a political track, a military track, and an economic track. All of Libya's institutions are still divided. Now, when we look at the cabinet that they've just endorsed, all of the positions have been endorsed, bar two changes. The first is that the foreign minister was changed from Lamia Abu Sidra to Najla al-Mangoush. That was done at the behest of the Speaker of the Parliament in eastern Libya, in order to have someone that is closer to their coalition, someone that is closer to Khalifa Haftar's Libyan National Army. The Minister of Defense position has been left empty. Now, that gives you an indication of really the bigger problems that have been kicked down the road, right, and that are still yet to kind of frustrate this process. So there's still much more left in this, in fact.
Right. And addressing the Parliament, the Prime Minister Dbeibah denounced the continued presence of mercenaries and other foreign forces. This has been an issue for Libya. Are the foreign powers who've backed these opposing sides in the conflict, whether it's Turkey, the UAE, Egypt, are they 100% on board with this agreement? Will they also turn over the page?
I don't believe so. And there's a number of reasons why I don't believe that is the case. Number one, we can continue to ignore these major elephants, essentially, in the room. Elephants now in central Libya, the very airport that received these members of parliament from eastern and western Libya, GNU airport in Sirte, is controlled by Russian mercenaries that have been deployed there since the summer. There was a withdrawal agreement as part of a ceasefire that was announced and signed by the rival factions in October of 2020. It gave them 90 days to withdraw all the forces. Those forces, as you said, remain today in Libya, and they number, according to the UN, 20,000. They've continued to be there, irrespective of the political process that took place in Geneva and in Tunisia, and irrespective of the vote that's taking place today. They are a long-term investment in some respects. Some of the forces, like the Turkish forces that deployed in November 2019, are new forces. Other forces that have been deployed into Libya stretch back at least until 2014, if we begin measuring on the Libyan National Army side, Egypt, the UAE, and Russia. So there is so much left in this that I think they're unwilling to let go of a 7-year investment without having real guarantees that their geostrategic objectives have been met. And that's still much, much further down the line.
So briefly, are elections planned for December 24th achievable?
Everything's achievable. It's an administrative process. I agree with your question. Dipping our fingers in ink in Libya is not the problem. It's an administrative process that can be done. The question is always going to be, are they free and fair elections? Free and fair elections requires a number of things, but let me just dwell on focus on 2 of them. Libyans have had a steady diet of toxic disinformation that has ripened them towards conflict over the past several years. That is part of the ceasefire agreement that both sides have adhered to, at least in principle and on paper, but are not adhering to in practice. So the Libyan populace itself is not necessarily right at a stage where it's ripe to start making those kind of decisions. The second aspect is that we have, as you've already mentioned, that we have all these mercenaries on the ground. We have rival military factions on the ground. Will they allow for representatives or nominees to canvass openly in a practical sense? If I have an issue with Khalifa Haftar in eastern Libya, can I still travel to eastern Libya and canvass for votes? If I'm a political party, irrespective of which side I am on or where I'm on the spectrum, can I go there and canvass for votes? Will I be safe on the day to elect a member of parliament or a presidential candidate of my own choice, or will I be harassed, or will I be put off? We've seen in the previous years that around election time in 2012 July, there was violence that closed down at least 5% of the ballot boxes. Libya's last elections in 2014 took place a month and a half after Khalifa Haftar split the country and brought the country to its first civil war in the summer. So we also have to be cautious of that. Given that there were so many guns on the ground, that's a deep and a very difficult issue to consider.
So a long road ahead, it seems. Thank you very much, Anas Al-Gamati, for talking to us about the situation in Libya.